welcome back to another video. My name is Jill and today I'm going to be doing my June reading wrap-up, so let's get started. I managed to read 11 and a half books in the month of June, which is insanity. That is like my best reading month that I've had all year. The reason I was able to read so much is because I am currently on my summer vacation from school, and for the month of June I didn't really have a lot of plans, so I had a lot of time to read, which I am all for. So without further ado, let's just get into all of the books I read, because there was a lot of them and I have a lot to say about them. The first book that I have here is Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, The Sword of Summer by Rick Riordan. Finally managed to read this book after months of putting it off. The main reason I was putting it off is because recently Rick Riordan hasn't been connecting with me very much. I didn't really love his Heroes of Olympus series, and it just like, I wasn't really connecting with the humor or the storylines anymore, so I really wanted to like this book, but I was nervous to go into it. But this is his Norse mythology book, so it follows a boy named Magnus Chase, and he is the son of a Norse god. And let me tell you guys, Norse mythology fascinates me to no end. I cannot even describe it. I think the reason for that is because my entire life I've learned Greek mythology, and at this point I feel like I know it like the back of my hand, but Norse mythology is completely and totally new, and the whole concept of it just fascinates the hell out of me. So that was by far my favorite aspect of this book, because I went in knowing nothing about Norse mythology at all. I just knew that it sounded really cool, and I know that Rick Riordan takes lots of liberties with his stories, but I still feel like I've learned a lot from this book, which is really, really great. One thing that I didn't really like about this book was a similar reason to why I wasn't connecting with like his Heroes of Olympus series, is because of the humor in it. So in the first part of the book I loved the humor. I thought that it was on point, I was giggling, I was laughing, it was great. But by the second half it was starting to go into the Heroes of Olympus inappropriate, weird, not my kind of humor. So I cringed a lot in the second half, and it just made me so disappointed because the first half was so great and then the second half was like... Anyway, so I think I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I'm definitely going to read the next book, and I'm hoping that the humor sort of improves. I did really enjoy this book, and I think I liked it much more than his Heroes of Olympus series, so that's always a plus. So yes, this was the first book that I read this month. The next book that I completed in the month of June was Tosh Hearts Tolstoy by Catherine Ormsby. This book essentially follows a girl named Tosh, and she is obsessed with Leo Tolstoy to the point where she and her friends make this little mini web series on YouTube based off of Anna Karenina. And one night a really, really famous blogger actually mentions their little web series, and they basically gain 50,000 subscribers overnight. So it's basically how her and her friends deal with this sudden fame. My favorite part of this book by far was that Tosh was a romantic asexual. I had never read a book that featured an asexual character before, so that was really, really interesting to see, and I would just highly recommend this book just for that reason. I did have a couple of problems with this book, however. Just some aspects of this book felt a little bit unrealistic to me. I'm not going to go into depth because it would sort of spoil it, and it might have been because I've never been a part of a working cast for a web series, but just some of the web series aspects felt a little bit unrealistic for me. And also Tosh was not the funnest person to be in the head of. She sort of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not exactly sure why she did, but I don't know, just being in her head the entire book got a little bit on my nerves. So that lessened my enjoyment of this book. This is a really important book for the YA community, and I cannot stress that enough. So if you are at all interested in reading about an asexual main character, definitely pick this up. Now of course I'm not asexual, so I cannot test to the accuracy of this representation, but from what I've been hearing, it's good rep, but like I said, I cannot personally talk about how accurate it was, but yeah, definitely pick it up if you are interested. Next up, I read a classic, and this is for a little read-along thing that I'm doing with 3 of my really good friends, and we're reading like a bunch of classics over the summer. But the one that I read next was Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I'm not really going to say much about this book, other than that it was really depressing. Like, this book, man, I finished it and I just felt so empty. I did end up enjoying it, but I feel very conflicted on my thoughts of this book because I would never recommend anyone read it, but like I sort of appreciated it. I'm sort of a mess when it comes to my thoughts, but it basically follows this guy post World War I who comes into contact with this really rich family and his like workings within this family. Yeah. Anyway, I sort of enjoyed it, but sort of not. I'm confused about it. I did tab a lot of the quotes in it, so that's a good point. Next up, I read an absolutely fantastic book, and that was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the third and final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy, and the first one being A Darker Shade of Magic, and this whole series basically follows a guy named Kel, who is the one of two people who can travel between these parallel Londons, and there's 4 parallel Londons, and it's really magical, and it's just so good, and these characters, oh my god. So I loved A Darker Shade of Magic, I loved A Gathering of Shadows, but this book really just honed in my love for this series. Like, I'm in love with all of the characters from this book now. Like, I loved them before, but this just takes them to a whole nother level. This was everything that I could have wanted in a conclusion to a trilogy. The entire, like, first quarter of this book, literally, like, my heart was pounding so hard because the end of A Gathering of Shadows ends on such a terrible cliffhanger, and it picks up like right at the end of A Gathering of Shadows, and I swear to God, this book, guys, it was fabulous. I just love Rye and Kel, and their bromance is the best thing ever, and Alucard and Lila and another character that I don't want to talk about because it spoils it, and oh my god, I love these people so much. Please help me. Next up, I read another I'll never get over this book, and that was Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I actually buddy read this book with my friend Christina from Christina's Journey. I will link her channel down below. We buddy read this book, and holy shit. So this is the sequel to Illuminae, and I loved Illuminae. It was one of my favorite books of 2016, but I just kept putting this book off. I have no idea why, and let me tell you, this book blew my freaking mind. I'm not going to talk about what this book is about, or really Illuminae. I feel like you should go into these books like not really knowing, other than that they're sci-fi and they're told completely in files. Like, these are some of the pages in this book. Like, please, if you haven't read Illuminae yet, please read it, and then read this book, because this book just takes it to a whole nother level. Now, this is the companion novel to Illuminae. It's not the direct sequel, so it does follow different characters on a different ship. I finished this book like 2 weeks ago, and I'm still not over how cool this was. Next up, I read a pretty disappointing book, and that was A Map for Wrecked Girls by Jessica Taylor. This is an arc. It comes out in August. I'll put the date down here. I got this arc from my local bookstore, and I was expecting to really like it because this book essentially is pitched as a Pretty Little Liars meets Gone Girl, which I don't think is really true at all. It follows these two sisters named Emma and Henry, and they are stranded on this deserted island with this boy, and immediately when we open on this book we can tell that Emma and Henry, something came between them. So this book alternates between the past and the present, so we get to find out what basically ruined Emma and Henry's relationship, and then we fast forward to them on the island. It's a really cool concept. I don't really even know, like, what I liked about this book, to be honest. I thought that it was extremely insta-lovey. It was pretty cliche. It also just, I really don't like the books that feature like 15-year-olds going to parties and getting drunk and like having sex and all these like things. That's just not my favorite thing to read about. I find it pretty unrealistic. And that, like, literally the entire like past was just that. So there was like a kind of twist at the end, but I didn't really care at that point. So yeah, this one was not my favorite, obviously. I'm probably gonna have to lower my rating now because I honestly can't remember what I liked about it. Next up, I read Confess by Colleen Hoover, which was another one of my favorite books of the month. I read this book in a total of 5 hours-ish, sort of. I started it really late at night and like read until 2:30 in the morning, and I just loved every second of it. I'll be the first to say that this book has a lot of problematic elements in it. Like, it is not perfect at all, but for some reason Colleen Hoover is my drug. Whenever I start one of her books, I cannot stop until I finish, and as soon as I'm done, I feel like I'm suffering withdrawal. I don't know what it is about Colleen Hoover. This is a new adult romance book. All of Colleen Hoover's books are new adult romance, which means that it features characters from 19 to 25, which means they're like romance books, but they are pretty steamy, so if you are a youngin', definitely don't go into this one. I'm not going to really go in depth of what it's about, but I did want to say one thing. It follows a artist who basically takes these anonymous confessions from people and creates art out of them, which was really cool. So it's very artsy and I loved it. I liked Ugly Love more than this book, but this book was also really great, and I love Colleen Hoover now, and I'm so excited to read more of her books. Next up, I read a 1-star book, another classic for the little classics read-along thing that I'm doing, and that was Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Let me tell you, this book bored me to tears. I feel like I know that there's good stuff in this book, but I just didn't care. I gave this book a 1 star, I skimmed the last 50 pages, it was so boring. It follows this woman through a day in her life in England in like post-World War I, and I could not get into it at all. So that's all I'm gonna say. And next up, I read another classic for the little read-along thing, and this one was tremendously short. I finished it in like a couple hours, and that was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I'm still like, don't even know how to react to this book. Like, I finished it and I was just like, well crap. Like, I just go with not knowing anything to this book. I highly recommend reading it. Yeah, I don't even know how to feel about this book. I feel it's really short, so I would say pick it up if you want a really interesting book. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say about it. It was really interesting. Next up, I ended up reading The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, and I decided to read this book, one, because I've had the entire series on my shelves for a really long time, and two, because the movie that is going to be coming out soon for this book is going to feature Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, which aka Spider-Man, and Rey from Star Wars, which I cannot wait for this movie. So I picked up this book not really knowing what to expect, and this is a sci-fi book. You can't really tell from the back of the book. It follows this boy named Todd, and he lives in this world where everyone can hear everyone else's thoughts, but then he stumbles along this patch of silence. He goes on the run. So this book was a case of, I just don't think that it was 100% for me. I can completely understand why people like this book so much, but I don't even know what it was. It just didn't 100% connect with me, if that made sense. I will for sure be reading the next books in the series because I'm interested in them, and because this book ends on the biggest cliffhanger ever. So I'm hoping that I connect more in the next books, but this first one was just sort of meh, in my opinion. I just don't think that it was for me, you know? We've reached the end, everyone. The final book that I read in the month of June was one that I was so excited about, and I was not disappointed, and that was Warcross by Marie Lu. I got this arc from my local bookstore, Changing Hands. This book comes out in September. Again, I will put the date right down here. This book was fabulous. I'm so excited for you guys to read it. It basically follows this badass rainbow-haired hacker slash bounty hunter where she hacks into this world's like virtual reality game. It's set in the near future, and the world has basically been taken over by this virtual reality game called Warcross, and there is this huge championship game that is coming up, and like I said, our rainbow-haired hacker accidentally hacks into the opening ceremony, and she expects to be arrested and all this kind of stuff, but the creator of the game actually calls her up and says, hey, come to Tokyo for me, I have a job for you. And that's all I'm going to say as far as summary-wise. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that the world was one of the coolest ones that I've read about. The virtual reality and the way that things are described are fabulous. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous. I just loved all the description in this book. Another thing I really liked was our main character. It's either Emika or Amika, I'm not really sure, but she was so relatable. I really loved her. She felt very real to me. And also, probably my favorite aspect of this book was the action scenes. There's this one scene in this book which was so freaking badass. I cannot even describe it. I'm not gonna spoil it or anything, but when you guys read this book, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a scene in one of the Warcross games, and the best way that I can describe Warcross is like a slowed down version of Super Smash Brothers. There were just a few things that I didn't 100% enjoy about this book, which is why I didn't give it a full 5 stars. For one, some of the minor characters I loved, but they were just so underdeveloped. So I feel like if the characters were more fleshed out, and that some of the events, if they were more fleshed out, then that would have been I would have liked it much more. Second off is that this book does feature an extremely insta-lovey situation. Like, you can tell from the very beginning that this relationship is going to happen. Now, I will be the first to admit that I was completely in all for this relationship, despite the fact that it was insta-lovey, but it is there, so if that's something that you extremely hate, just be aware that there is pretty strong insta-love in this book. And the last thing that I didn't 100% enjoy about this book was that the ending was extremely rushed. Like, it stops in the middle of this whole thing and it ends on a terrible cliffhanger, and like, it's one thing to end on a cliffhanger, it's another to end on an extremely rushed, underdeveloped ending, which I feel like is what this one leaned towards. But overall, it was a really fun book. Like I said, the concept and the world that this is set in is so unique and beautiful, and it was fabulous. So overall, I really extremely liked this book. There were a few problems that I had, but overall, fabulous. This is the part of the video where I would normally talk about my TBR books for July, but considering that I'm sure this video is already extremely long, I'm just going to split the videos this month. So look out for my July TBR coming hopefully this week, very soon, or something like that. And wait one second before you click out of this video, I have sort of a little bit of an announcement slash shout out thing to do. So if you guys have not noticed, I actually just got a new banner for my channel. I can insert like a picture right here. This is my new banner, and I actually got my really good friend Kirsty from A Stroke of Genius on Instagram to design it for me, and I'm just so thankful to her, and I definitely wanted to shout her out. I will link her Instagram down below. She is such a talented calligraphy artist, and I highly recommend going and following her on Instagram and, you know, just talking to her, because she's so sweet and nice, and I love her so much, and I just cannot express my gratitude enough to her for doing this banner for me, because it ended up looking fabulous and I love it so much. So thank you again, Kirsty, for being amazing and helping me with this, and again, definitely go check her out because she is so talented. You will not be disappointed. Anyway, so yeah, that's going to be the end of my June wrap-up video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you are new here. Give this video a like if you enjoyed. I have my Goodreads, Twitter, Bookstagram, and personal Instagram linked down below if you want to follow me on those platforms. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys later in another video. Bye!